comfortable with. So this is the Mangalacharan, which is a invocation that we chant before we actually get into the study of any bhakti text.
Or anything in life.
Yeah.
Om Jnana Timirandhasya Vyaranjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsya Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar
Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
So finished first chapter, right?
Yeah.
So we are on to second chapter today.
Sanjay Vacha Tam Tatha Kripaya Vishtam Ashrupurna Kulekshanam Visidantam Idam Vakyam Uvacha Madhusudana. Sanjaya said, seeing Arjuna full of compassion, his mind depressed, his eyes full of tears, Madhusudana, Krishna, spoke the following words.
I think we should read this.
Yeah.
This is a very nice purport, and then we'll discuss it. Material compassion, lamentation, and tears are all signs of ignorance of the real self. Compassion for the eternal soul is self-realization. The word Madhusudana is significant in this verse. Lord Krishna killed the demon Madhu, and now Arjuna wanted Krishna to kill the demon of misunderstanding that had overtaken him in the discharge of his duty. No one knows where compassion should be applied. Compassion for the dress of a drowning man is senseless. A man fallen in the ocean of nescience cannot be saved simply by rescuing his outward dress, the gross material body. One who does not know this and laments for the outward dress is called a Shudra, or one who laments unnecessarily. Arjuna was a Kshatriya, and this conduct was not expected from him. Lord Krishna, however, can dissipate the lamentation of the ignorant man, and for this purpose the Bhagavad Gita was sung by him. This chapter instructs us in self-realization by an analytical study of the material body and the spirit soul as explained by the Supreme Authority, Lord Shri Krishna. This realization is possible when one works without attachment for fruitive results and is situated in the fixed conception of the real self.
So this kind of starts out, setting the scene is Arjuna in this state of complete disarray, his mind depressed, his eyes full of tears, and this is how he's starting out this whole chapter. Quite an unusual scene to see a world-class warrior like Arjuna and a great king to be in this situation in front of everybody. This is not to be expected. So very dramatic scene. And then Prabhupada talks about this difference between material compassion and spiritual compassion. So what did you guys understand from this? Let me go to the group view.
What is our conception of what compassion is, and how are the two different kinds of compassion being differentiated between them? And is that difference, according to you, something that that one can explain or understand for oneself?
So Arjuna is being compassionate, but Prabhupada is bringing out this difference between, until I read this, I didn't really know that there are two kinds of compassion, material compassion and spiritual compassion. Normally you just think compassion, which is good enough. But here the differentiation is made. So I just wanted to hear from you guys what you understood from what Prabhupada is saying, one of our newer guests.
Anybody? It's okay. I think.
Well, from what I understand here, like a lot of times I find myself confusing material compassion, like lamenting for someone that's died or anything that's, you know, in the material. Like I catch myself thinking that like that's good, but here it kind of clarifies that to lament those things like is to kind of subvert the compassion that you have for like your soul, and you know, recognizing that everyone has like an infinite spirit soul that never dies. So like just reminding us of that whenever we lose something in the material world that makes us sad or anything like that.
Very nice.
Very
Thank you.
nice. Very
Thank
nice.
you. Anybody else?
Jamie, do you have any thoughts? Okay, anybody else? Anshul, Anchita, Shweta.
If somebody is suffering, like I put myself in their shoes, then that is compassion. But the suffering is just physical, like at the physical level. But according to Srila Prabhupada, is saying having compassion for the eternal soul. When you feel for the eternal soul, that is the real compassion in spiritual world. Like.
So yeah, very nice. Actually, these are really, really good points. At the same time, I was just thinking that, you know, when we understand the cause of that suffering body, so it's not that we disregard the physical body, but we understand that the cause why the living entity is suffering in this body is not just because of the body, right? It is because of this consciousness or the soul being engaged in this body, right? So one goes to the source of all miseries. Because generally speaking, you know, when people see that someone is suffering, then, you know, they'll say, oh, someone is hungry, let me give them some food. Someone is feeling cold, let me give them some clothes, and so on and so forth, right? That's good, but it does not address the root cause of that suffering.
So it's like you see a bird in a cage and the bird is hungry and really suffering. So you put a piece of bread inside the cage for the bird to eat. And then the bird eats and becomes happy again. And that's a good thing to feed the bird inside. But what would be the next higher thing to do, which will actually take care of both? Is to free the bird from the cage, right? To open the door to the cage so the bird can fly out. So the difference between material compassion and spiritual compassion is that it's not one or the other. Like sometimes when we start differentiating, we think it's just the one or the other. Either I choose material compassion or I choose spiritual compassion. It's not that. Spiritual compassion includes within it the material part of the compassion, which is directed towards the body, taking care of the body. It's already included, but
it doesn't stop there.
It doesn't stop there. It actually goes much beyond that and really takes care of the person at all different levels, physical, mental, spiritual, and the person is completely satisfied with that compassion. And you as the giver of that compassion, you are also completely satisfied, because in the spiritual compassion, who is the center in the spiritual compassion and who is the center in the material compassion? So let me ask you that question. Who is in the center in material compassion?
Body.
The body is in the center, the body of the receiver, but from the point of view of the giver, who is in the center?
Yes, the other person or other thing.
yeah, the other person, but more importantly, as the giver, I am in the center. I am giving something. It's nice to give, but because of the material conception, you have this wrong conception that I am the giver. I can fix, or I can help, or I can elevate people. I'm in a better position, so let me help them, and all those things. So it's still I am in the center, and in the spiritual compassion, who is in the center?
Krishna.
Yeah.
Meaning you are showing the compassion because you want to show to the other person how he can get closer to Krishna. So Krishna is the center of of why you're showing the compassion to the other person.
Yeah, and then that's precisely the difference. In material compassion, a person may feel pity for somebody, right? Or say you see a really hungry or suffering man, you feel pity for them and you give them something, but you still differentiate between them and you. And you never want to, or a person may not want to consider a really a fallen or whatever person or suffering person as one of their own. They may want to maintain that distance. So when in spiritual compassion, you see both yourself and that person belonging to Krishna, part of the same family, and you are offering yourself as an instrument of that help or whatever you're providing to that person. And therefore, you do not consider yourself as the doer or the giver. You see that Krishna is the real giver. He's providing for everybody, and I'm just an instrument of that compassion that's coming from Krishna. So, yeah.
Anshul Anchita, I think you have your hand up. You want to have some question or some comment?
No, thoughts and on the same question actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So going back to the video you shared from like the movie from Prabhupada.
Yeah.
I think even after so many days, I mean, I'm still thinking that video was actually showing that how you can live Gita every day. And coming back to the compassion question, I remember that how Prabhupada was actually seeing everyone, not seeing them, their body as the body, and they were not compassionating. They were not compassionate with the people. They were compassionate with the soul, and because how they can satisfy their soul, how they can bring close to Krishna, and as Prabhuji said, that what is the root of that misery? What is the root of that problem? So I think that he was trying to solve that, and that was the compassion.
Very nice. Excellent point, Anshul. And as you were speaking, I was also thinking about another additional point, which is actually a limitation of material compassion. That because it is based on the body, so I may decide that I'm going to be compassionate to another body, which is like my body. So I can choose to be compassionate to somebody who belongs to my race, to my gender, to my nationality, to my species, right?
Or something that I like. Except people like to protect the whales or protect like the dolphins or protect a particular bird, but then it's only limited to that.
So we are choosing compassion based on the other person's material identity. So again, it becomes narrow, right? Because all right, if you want to save, humans, then what about the plants and what about the animals? So when you address the living spark within, then one can actually be compassionate on an equal platform to all living beings, all part and parcel of the Supreme Absolute. So anybody else?
Hare Krishna, Mataji and Prabhuji.
Yes, go ahead.
So, I was trying to play a devil's advocate role here. So I was thinking, you gave a bird's example where, like cage, we are feeding and bird is flying. The two similarities. So I was thinking, if the bird is really weak enough, he cannot fly. We need to first feed him so that he has energy to fly, and then he can fly. So similarly, if somebody has a material needs, he may not understand spirituality at all at that stage. He is suffering. He is in a really bad situation. So if we just ignore his or her material needs and just try to give him spirituality, he may not understand at all, right? Because I feel that he needs some strength to stand up, and then giving him spirituality kind of makes sense. Otherwise, I mean, that's my point.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And that's what Prabhupada, you can see how Prabhupada demonstrated this spiritual compassion in a practical way. Like when he got all these hippies and these people who were really suffering, he took care of them materially. He fed them very nicely. And at the same time, he also gave them spiritual knowledge. So it is spiritual compassion means a holistic approach to looking at the person, how that person can be helped in such a way that they can become attracted to Krishna, and they can be connected to Krishna. So that can mean that their bodily needs are taken care of, their mental needs are taken care of, and ultimately their spiritual needs are taken care of. So
It's all inclusive.
it's all inclusive. So we should not think that spiritual compassion means just telling them about Krishna and not feeding the person. That is not spiritual compassion.
In fact, when we look at Prabhupada's life, when he first came to America and he stayed at the Bowery, the first thing he did was he was cooking for them. And he was welcoming people to just come and just stay. They were homeless people. He would just ask them to come and stay with him right in the Bowery. And later, when Prabhupada actually started this movement, he said that anyone who is within 10 miles of my temple, they should not go hungry. So he started this whole prasadam distribution, right? This Food for Life program. So the point being that, but the thing is that what is the ultimate purpose? The purpose is not that I just want to feed people, but that but the idea is to feed people Krishna prasadam, by which they are benefited both materially and spiritually. When we don't have that complete understanding, then our compassion is incomplete or it's insufficient. But when you bring in the spiritual element, then the material compassion is also taken care of, and the spiritual, and they derive the ultimate benefit through that material compassion.
It's like somebody having a bad headache and you just give them a Tylenol and go away. But a holistic approach would be you give them the Tylenol, but you also try to find out why is it causing the person headache, and you try to solve the problem. So spiritual compassion means all inclusive. It's like $100 bill automatically includes a $1 bill. So it's already included. Whatever we would do on the material compassion platform is already included in the spiritual compassion platform. Sometimes, as you pointed out, we may think that spiritual compassion just means telling the person about Krishna or spiritual life and not doing anything for their material and physical needs. That is not correct. That is not spiritual compassion. That is, again, our misconception or misapplication of spiritual compassion.
That makes sense. Thank you so much, Prabhuji and Mataji.
Thank you. Anybody else? We can move on.
A small thought, Mataji.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, like, Srila Prabhupada was able to inspire so many people into Krishna consciousness. In our small little way, if we can inspire people around us, like, if they see us as a good example and, they are able to take to this path, that is our way of contributing for the spiritual compassion. Like, whatever little, I may not inspire thousands, but even if 2-3 people get inspired, I have tried my best, is what I think.
A very beautiful story, actually, in that regard, where there was this man who was walking on the shores of a ocean on the beach, and he was picking up little fishes that had been swept by the waves. And so he would pick up one fish and he would throw it back in the waves, in the water, and then promptly there would be 10 more that would fall off on the beach. And there was this one man who kept watching this person doing this all day. So finally he couldn't resist it, and he said, I've been watching you, you've been doing this all day. What difference does it really make? You're picking one, but there are 10 more that are getting washed into the shore. So then he just picked up a fish and he threw the fish back into the water, and he said, just made a difference to that one. So, we obviously, we are so tiny, so we'll not be able to make a difference to every single person. But whoever we touch, and just today, actually, wanted to share with you that we actually send out books to veterans hospitals. And Bhaktilata, I don't know if she's there on the call, she'll be so happy to hear this. But, there was a person who actually called from LA today because he has received these books.
He went to the veteran hospital, and he lives in a veteran house, which is like common living with so many other people who are going through so many disabilities and difficulties. So he picked up that book, couple of books from, he actually picked up a meditation kit that we had sent. And he called that, hey, I want to know more about your health centers. And I'm really into Krishna philosophy. And I really want to know more about it. So where are you located?
And he's been reading the books, because when we asked him, he talked about the books. He said, I've been reading Bhakti, The Art of Eternal Love. And so, you know, one person, so many books went out and one person calls back. But, you know, you feel so happy because, you know, it's a tiny little effort, but then, you know, for one person, it means the world, right? It makes a complete difference, just like it's made a difference into our life. So this is actually a very essential practice of Bhakti. Is not just that we become satisfied because we receive this knowledge, but we should tax our brain and we should think of creative ways of how we can reach out and how we can share, you know, this knowledge with people who are actually looking for it. And
that is the third difference I was thinking about spiritual compassion and material compassion. Material compassion, when we apply it, the buck stops there, the person and the giver and the receiver, and it stops there. It doesn't. But the spiritual compassion, whenever it is given to anybody, by anybody, it's like a fragrance that keeps on flowing. And you give it to some person, and that person is satisfied, but the impact doesn't stop at that person. It grows. Even if they don't do anything, that impact of receiving spiritual compassion grows out of their body or their consciousness, and it flows to other people and other places. So that is the nature of spiritual compassion. It just flows. And yeah.
And we see that Prabhupada talks about that, you know, in this world, actually what is needed now, you know, is not, you know, we already have enough skyscrapers and fast cars and so many different things. But what is lacking is actually this consciousness of loving God. That is what is lacking, this faith, you know, this connection with them. And that's why, you know, if you want peace in the world, then it has to start with each one of us. And then we can become the change. And so, you know, once we understand the difference between material compassion and spiritual compassion, then we can start acting on this platform or living our life on the basis of this spiritual compassion, which is very deeply satisfying to the soul and to Krishna. It's the quickest way to actually attract Krishna's attention.
All right, so let's go back. So if this question, you have any more thoughts, you can speak out.
Let's get to the next verse now.
Yeah. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Kutastva Kashmalam Idam Vishame Samupastitam Anarya Justam Aswargyam Akirti Karam Arjuna.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Mighty Arjuna, how have these impurities come upon you? They are not at all befitting a man who knows the value of life. They lead not to higher planets, but to infamy. Krishna and the Supreme Personality of Godhead are identical. Therefore, Lord Krishna is referred to as Bhagavan throughout the Gita. Bhagavan is the ultimate in the absolute truth. The absolute truth is realized in three phases of understanding, namely Brahman, or the impersonal, all-pervasive spirit, Paramatma, or the localized aspect of the Supreme within the heart of all living entities, and Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, this conception of the absolute truth is explained thus. Vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yadjnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdate. The absolute truth is realized in three phases of understanding by the knower of the absolute truth, and all of them are identical. Such phases of the absolute truth are expressed as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan.
These three divine aspects can be explained by the example of the sun. So the reason Prabhupada is talking about Bhagavan and the absolute truth here is because this is the first time Krishna is speaking, and Krishna is addressed as Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, which means the Bhagavan is speaking. So therefore Prabhupada is explaining what Bhagavan means and what God means. These three divine aspects can be explained by the example of the sun, which also has three different aspects, namely the sunshine, the sun's surface, and the sun planet itself. One who studies the sunshine only is the preliminary student. One who understands the sun's surface is further advanced, and one who can enter into the sun planet is the highest. Ordinary students who are satisfied by simply understanding the sunshine Its universal pervasiveness and the glaring effulgence of its impersonal nature may be compared to those who can realize only the Brahman feature of the absolute truth. The student who has advanced still further can know the sun disk, which is compared to knowledge of the Paramatma feature of the absolute truth. And the student who can enter into the heart of the sun planet is compared to those who realize the personal features of the supreme absolute truth. Therefore, the bhaktas, or the transcendentalists who have realized the Bhagavan feature of the absolute truth, are the topmost transcendentalists, although all students who are engaged in the study of the absolute truth are engaged in the same subject matter. The sunshine, the sun disk, and the inner affairs of the sun planet cannot be separated from one another, and yet the students of the three different phases are not in the same category. So let's discuss that a little bit.
What did we understand? Anything that you... This is actually a very, very important conception to have complete clarity and also to be able to explain it to others. So it's a good point to pause and see what is our understanding.
What is the difference between the three phases and what is the similarity? Other than silence.
Well, the similarity is that they're all part of the same absolute. I mean, it's the Krishna's effulgence that is the Brahma Jyoti. That's the effulgence of the impersonal that some impersonalists pray to, and the Paramatma is our super soul who is always accompanying every living entity. So it's all Krishna who is exhibiting all the three things. And
thank you.
So we'll one thing at a time so that we can share. Anybody else? Daryl, Ashley, Shuchi, if you have any understanding on this, Amrita, Hetal, yes. Your voice is not clear.
One thing which I understood, Mataji,
yes,
is that we have to, get to the heart of the sun, as in this example it is given, we should focus on the heart of the sun. That is the absolute truth, and it is the personal form of the Bhagwan.
Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, because once you have understood, entered into the sun planet, then within the sun planet, the effulgence is already included. One doesn't have to seek the effulgence separately. Thank you. Anybody else? Dominic, what's your understanding? Does this make sense, or?
I'm trying to figure out, reaching the Bhagavan level, and at first it was my understanding that only Krishna occupies that level, but are devotees, or as the purport describes, transcendentalists or bhaktas, can get there?
Yeah. So let's use another example. I feel that my favorite example is actually the train example, which is also given by Prabhupada. And that actually, to me, really, helps me understand. So, if you went and you stood on an early morning, and you saw this train coming, then you would just look at this big, light, right, which the train has. And then, somebody asked you, what's the train look like? And you would say, it's just this big blob of light. And then the train comes and stands on the platform. Then you realize, oh, it's got this engine, it's got these cars, and and it has a form. So that would be sort of the Paramatma feature, right? Where you actually realize that there is actually a long train and it has a specific form and it's localized. And then if somebody actually took the time to actually open the door of the train and go inside, then they would say, oh, there's a whole world inside there. There are people, they're talking, they're interacting, they're loving each other. So in the same way, those three actually connect with these three aspects. So the first one is that effulgence of that absolute truth. And many traditions, many people, if you ask them what is God or who is God, they'll simply say it's light. God is light. In fact,
peace.
Or peace, or just love, or it's like this abstract kind of an understanding of some effulgence or some energy out there. So that's the Brahman, or the impersonal understanding. The
Or they may say this universe, universal consciousness, universal energy. There's so many different terms to denote the same thing, which is, the energy.
The energy, right? So that is the impersonal, right? And then somebody might be a little bit more evolved, and they'll say, well, actually, that supreme truth actually resides within each one of our heart and is seated in the heart as my friend. And we have also seen how people, they say that how they can hear this inner voice, and how there's a friend who's within us all, and like that, all different ways in which we address that friend within. So that is the Paramatma understanding. Now, within the Paramatma understanding, the Brahman is already included, right? Then if somebody actually goes further along, then they will say, oh, there is a Bhagavan who is actually the source of all of these other two understanding, and who is a person, and who engages in loving relationship. Now, even within the Bhagavan understanding, there are different levels of Bhagavanhood, if you may say, which means that there are forms of Bhagavan who are much more in a reverential, official mood. So they want to, so you will relate to them. Like, for example, in the Vedic tradition, there would be the Vishnu or the Narayan forms. But even in Christianity, for example, the way we worship God, right? It's like, please, you're my father, so there is this mood of reverence or respect or awe. So that is actually the reverential form of Bhagavan. And then it keeps, going up, where you get to Krishna, who is with whom you can have this most intimate love, a relationship of love, where there is no conception of formality, right? So that is the supreme, and that's why Prabhupada uses the word supreme personality of Godhood. So that is the supreme Bhagavanhood,
Another way you can understand these three features is that, say, the very famous company, you can pick any company right now, Amazon or Google or whatever, and people say they don't know anything about that company. They just heard the name and how wonderful it is. So they're just kind of aware of the greatness of that particular company, and they like it or dislike it, whatever it is. So that's that greatness of the company, or people kind of having that some kind of feeling or whatever about it. That's kind of like the Brahman effulgence, or the energy of that company spread throughout the world and whatever, all that. And the second level is like an employee who actually has a relationship with that company, who works there, and he draws a salary from that company and offers some service to the company. That employee is now aware of who that relationship with that employee, with the CEO of that company, for example, is more like a provider. The CEO, he knows that this person is the CEO, but he's like a provider of the for my salary, and he's running everything. So he's aware of that CEO as a controller, as a provider, as a sanctioner. So the relationship is there, but it's in a different way, and that is a Paramatma feature, because as Paramatma, the supreme absolute truth appears in this material world as a controller, as a provider, as a sanctioner. So the relationship one has with the supreme is in that regard, in that context. And say now the child of the CEO, he has a very different relationship with the CEO. He doesn't think of the CEO as like this, like the big guy running the whole company. He may think like that, but he's more concerned about his personal, intimate relationship with the CEO. And he knows that same person in a very different way. He looks at the same person, interacts with the same person in a very different way. And that is the Bhagavan relationship. If you just consider these three features from the relationship point of view, one is having a distant knowledge about somebody. Second is knowing that person as a provider, a controller. And the third one is having a very deep, intimate relationship with that person. So those are the three features of absolute truth. But they are the same. So what, like Prabhupada says, that they are the three features of the absolute truth, depending on how you want to approach them. But the Bhagavan feature is the highest because it includes the other two features within it. And the other two features are dependent on the Bhagavan feature.
Hare Krishna Bhaiya. Our breakout room, it finished. Maybe actually the timing was not proper. So is it possible to?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So what do I do?
So I think you have to make.
Any further thoughts? Amrita?
Just like king and kingdom.
Yes, yes. Go ahead, Mataji.
Just like king and kingdom.
Yes.
King is not present everywhere.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. The king is not present everywhere, and yet the king
He's present.
He's present by his
Power.
right? Very nice. Very nice. Thank you. Daryl Ashley, do you have any thoughts on this? Your voices are not clear today, huh?
We can't hear you.
Okay, maybe we'll come back to you.
Anshul and Chitta, this is a very key concept in the Bhagavad Gita, understanding these three aspects of absolute, because this will come up again and again in the Bhagavad Gita, and we will help you.
So whenever these three words come in any context, I always think about the train example which Mataji has given now and have always given. There's you think about a light, or there is some source which is actually controlling everything, or there is some source beyond us who is there. And then you basically start to provide name and shape and try to personalize that. And then the third one is actually knowing and having a personal relationship. So that's the three things we always think about when these things comes up.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, Hare Krishna. Can I take a leave because my baby is crying?
No
Of course.
problem.
Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
So yes, Daryl and Ashley, it is natural. One of the aspects of love is that one wants to know more and more and more and more and more. So when you really truly love someone, then you want to know, so what happened 10 years from, when 10 years ago, when this happened to you, so you want to know the details of that person, wherever that person has been. So when one develops an attraction, or when one tries to develop love for the supreme person, then you want to know all his different incarnations. And this is what Maharaj Parikshit is speaking in the Srimad Bhagavatam. He says, I cannot tire of hearing about these different incarnations. And he wants to know the activities and the birth and the pastimes of all these different forms.
Because every incarnation, the main purpose is to exhibit this loving relationship with his devotees in different ways. And that really helps us to develop our relationship with Krishna and our love for Krishna more and more. So, because Krishna is unlimited, the love he can exchange with his devotees is also unlimited. And that's what we want to enter into.
Dominic, did that clarify your question about the three features? We never asked you.
Yeah, for sure. I was just a little confused by the sun one, because I was like, I don't think I can enter the sun or like see the sun. So the train example you gave me helped to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. All right. So I think we should maybe, it's 8:19, it's 8:20.
We can finish this book and then.
Yeah. Okay. Sarita, if you have any questions, Shuchi.
No, Didi, Hare Krishna. Today I'm just listening.
Oh, nice. Thank you. Yeah. Now this is the next part which is being explained, what Bhagavan really means.
The Sanskrit word, Dominic, you want to read this?
A lot of Sanskrit words.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
oh, sorry.
Go ahead. You want to try? Yeah, go ahead.
I'll try. The Sanskrit word Bhagavan is explained by the great authority Parasara Muni the father of Vasudeva, Vasudev, the Supreme Personality who possesses all riches, all strength, all fame, all beauty, all knowledge, and all renunciation is called Bhagavan. There are many personalities who are very rich, very powerful, very beautiful, very famous, very learned, and very much detached, but no one can claim that he possesses all riches, all strength, etc. entirely. Only Krishna can claim this because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. No living entity, including Brahma, Lord Shiva, or Narayana, can possess opulences as fully as Krishna. Therefore, it is concluded in the Brahmana Samhita by Lord Brahma himself that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. No one is equal to or above him. He is the primeval Lord or Bhagavan, known as Govinda, because he is the supreme cause of all causes.
Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. Go ahead.
There are many personalities possessing the qualities of Bhagavan, but Krishna is the supreme because none can excel him. He is the supreme person and his body is eternal, full of knowledge and bliss. He is the primeval Lord Govinda and the cause of all causes.
Thank you.
Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, go ahead. Let's finish this.
In the Bhagavatam, also, there is a list of many incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but Krishna is described as the original personality of Godhead, from whom many, many incarnations and personalities of Godhead expand.
Ete cham sakala pumsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Midayanti Yuge Yuge.
All the lists of the incarnations of Godhead submitted herewith are either plenary expansions or parts of the plenary expansions of the Supreme God.
Expansions.
Expansions?
Go ahead, you froze a little bit, yeah.
Oh, sorry. But Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. Therefore, Krishna is the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, the absolute truth, the source of both the super soul and the impersonal Brahman. In the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Arjuna's lamentation for his kinsman is certainly unbecoming, and therefore Krishna expressed his surprise with the word kuta, wherefrom. Such impurities were never expected from a person belonging to the civilized class of men known as Aryans. The word Aryan is applicable to persons who know the value of life and have a civilization based on spiritual realization. Persons who are led by the material conception of life do not know that the aim of life is realization of the absolute truth, Vishnu or Bhagavan, and they are captivated by the external features of the material world, and therefore they do not know what liberation is. Persons who have no knowledge of liberation from material bondage are called non-Aryans. Though Arjuna was a Kshatriya, he was deviating from his prescribed duties by declining to fight. This act of cowardice is described as befitting the non-Aryans. Such deviation from duty does not help one in the progress of spiritual life, nor does it even give one the opportunity to become famous in this world. Lord Krishna did not approve of the so-called compassion of Arjuna for his kinsman.
Thank you. So the first point that is made in the purport is that what is the definition of Bhagavan? Because you see this word Bhagavan is so misunderstood and misrepresented in the world today. Especially you'll see in India, there are so many false gurus or swamis, they claim themselves to be Bhagavan. Or their disciples will claim that he's an incarnation of God or God himself. And this has been going on since time immemorial, where people like to cheat others or try to present themselves as God. So here, Prabhupada is clearly defining what Bhagavan means. Bhagavan means somebody who has these 6 opulences in full: all riches, all power, all knowledge, all beauty, all renunciation, and
intelligence,
and all knowledge, and then also all qualities, all the good qualities. So a person who completely has infinite quantity of these 6 things, only that person can claim to be called as God. If there is somebody else who can say, I have more wealth than you, and then you're not God anymore. So therefore, understanding this, we can really separate the truth from the falsity, which is so prevalent in the world today. And it allows us to, it's not a sentimental understanding of God, because people generally can develop a sentimental understanding of God or preference for somebody. Well, there are so many great people, but there is only one God. And that God is not, and you can see this is not a sectarian understanding of God. This is not a sectarian understanding of God. This is very scientific understanding of God, right? It doesn't matter whether you're from Christian tradition or Islamic tradition or any tradition. This definition doesn't even talk about any particular tradition, right? It just talks about a person. If you can find such a person who has the 6 opulences in full, that person is God. So it doesn't really matter where you're from or which country or tradition you're from.
So any final thoughts or questions or comments? Amrita, we haven't heard from you. Gunjan.
Yeah, I was just, I was just listening to everything. And I think the one, aspect which I was thinking about was the Paramatma aspect, and compared to just thinking about, that if it was a personal relationship or at that point of time that you feel, compared to, I guess, the Bhagwan aspect. So I guess in the Bhagwan, you see, it's more personal than it is with the relationship with the Paramatma, right?
Yes. With Paramatma, there is some personal relationship, but it's not fully developed. Like the yogis who meditate on the Paramatma, they are meditating on him as Paramatma, but at the same time, there's a distance in terms of the feelings, and the relationship is not fully mature. Yes. It is the beginning. Paramatma you can think of as a beginning of a personal relationship with God. You're starting to establish a personal relationship with God when you approach Paramatma. It's just the beginning.
So at what aspect do we really know that we are, past the Paramatma aspect and we've reached that part where we actually see Krishna as, the Bhagwan?
When we start chanting, when we start hearing about Krishna, so the process of bhakti, right from the very beginning, is actually perfect. So it's not that, when we receive the seed of bhakti, the seed that we are receiving is not of yoga or karma or jnana. We are receiving the seed of bhakti from the very beginning by receiving the sambandha jnana. And if you remember, we talked about these 3 kinds of knowledge, right? There is sambandha, abhidheya, and prayojana. So sambandha means understanding who I am, who God is, and what is my relationship. And then there's abhidheya, which means that there is a process which is recommended that if you engage in this process, then you can realize this sambandha or this relationship. And then the prayojan is the final goal of that, which our goal is not to develop mystic power. Our goal is not to just liberation. Our goal is to develop love. So when one has a clear understanding of these 3 things, then the seed that one has received is that of pure bhakti. And we may not be perfect, but the process is perfect. The process is completely pure. So one is actually walking on the path of Bhagwan realization from the very beginning.
And for a devotee or even a beginner devotee, Krishna himself sits in the heart of the devotee. So there's no difference between Paramatma and Bhagavan for a devotee, because Krishna himself as the Bhagavan is sitting in the heart. Whereas for everybody else who's not trying to approach Krishna in that mode of bhakti, then Paramatma is sitting there, because they are non-different. So Krishna can sit there or Paramatma can sit there. It's our choice. And for a devotee, Krishna is always personally sitting in the heart and directing everything else in a personal way. And then that is available to in the very beginning stages of bhakti. And that's why bhakti is so satisfying right from the very beginning. Even if you are in like kindergarten of bhakti, you feel like you are like the king. And that is the special. Whereas in other paths, like the path of yoga, where you try to approach the Paramatma through austerity and like meditation for thousands of years, it's very difficult to approach or establish that personal relationship, right? It's just like if you try to approach a CEO, Prabhupada always gives the example, if you try to approach the president of a country, it may be so difficult for you to even get close to him, other than when he goes out on a campaign, whatever, and then you can shake hands with him for a second, and that's it. But if you know somebody who's very close to the president, and the president introduces, or that person introduces you to the president, then maybe you can go and spend time with him. Even for an hour, you can spend time with him. So that is the process of bhakti, because we know great devotees, and then by the mercy of those great devotees, Krishna makes himself available even to a very beginner, that otherwise would be impossible. It is said that the yogis, they chase after Krishna for thousands of lifetimes, but they're not able to connect with him because he's far away. But for a devotee, even in one lifetime, one can establish a firm relationship with Krishna, a loving relationship with Krishna, because Krishna is looking for that love.
Thank you. That makes complete sense.
Yeah, so you'll know that in bhakti, Krishna makes the most effort. We are just making tiny baby steps, and we are just like little toddlers who are just learning to speak. But Krishna is making most of the effort, and he's pleased by that babbling that we do. In trying to approach the Paramatma, you have to make the most effort. You have to go through the austerity over hundreds of lifetimes or thousands of years, and still the Paramatma may choose not to respond because he's sitting in that official capacity. So it's very hard to approach Paramatma, actually. And even harder than approaching Paramatma is harder to approach the Brahman effulgence. So you see, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, although it may seem that the Brahman or the effulgence is the most pervasive, but it is the hardest to achieve. And easier than that is to establish a connection with Paramatma. And easiest than that is to establish a connection with Bhagavan. Although in hierarchy they are upside down. The Bhagavan is the highest, but it's the easiest also. And Brahman is the lowest, but it's the hardest also. So, but Krishna is very kind because he's present in all these three aspects, so that whoever you are interested in, you can approach him. He's very kind. He's not saying that you have to approach Bhagavan, or you have to approach Paramatma, or you have to approach this and that. It's completely up to you. So therefore, in the Vedas, you will see that there are descriptions and the details given how to approach the Brahman. And then Upanishads talk a lot about how to approach the Brahman effulgence. And absolute truth is kind of presented in that way. So a person may think that, yeah, this is the only way I can know or understand the Supreme. And this is what I'm attracted to. So Krishna says, go for it. But a person wants to approach him in the official capacity of the provider, the controller of this material world. See, the Paramatma conception is only related to this, is only valid in the material world, because there is no Paramatma or super soul in the spiritual world. So the word Paramatma is only applicable to the material world. A soul wants to relate to absolute truth in this material world, and his presence is only in the material world. So then Krishna makes himself available in that capacity as a Paramatma. But if somebody wants to relate to God in a more personal way, a completely personal way, then he's also present as Bhagavan. So it's what's up to us. And so you'll see the Vedas, they describe all three paths, whoever you're interested in. Anybody else? All right.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Actually, till now, I was thinking that Paramatma is superior than Bhagavan, because everyone makes Guru and they said they are Bhagavan to us. So it is very clear to me now that Bhagavan word is more superior to Paramatma.
Yeah.
And I have a question, like if we think of Bhagwan and if we meditate on Bhagwan, we think of Krishna's Swarupa. But is there any Swarupa or Roop for Paramatma or Brahma? Krishna has a structure or we can think about Krishna's roop like
Yes.
Bhagwan.
Yes.
But is there any structure for Paramatma or Brahma?
Yes. So very good question. So Bhagwan, you can think of him as Krishna, or you can think of him any of his incarnations, like Lord Rama. That is also Bhagwan. That is just Krishna's expansion. That is also Bhagwan. Or Lord Narasimha. Those are some of the more commonly worshipped incarnations. They are all Bhagavan, and one can, according to your desire and taste, you can approach any one of those incarnations. As far as Paramatma is concerned, he has a form, and that is described as the four-armed form, a Vishnu form, that is described in the Bhagavatam in great detail, how to meditate on the Paramatma, and what each of his four hands have, and what he's wearing and everything. But essentially, it's the four-armed Vishnu form who's seated in our heart as the Paramatma. So the yogis meditate on that. They meditate on the Vishnu form. And the Brahman effulgence, there is no form, because effulgence or energy doesn't have any form, right? So there is, you can't really meditate on a particular form, but people who are interested in the Brahman effulgence, they just meditate on this light, this universal light or energy that is all pervasive. They meditate on the all connectedness of everything that exists in the world, that how we are all connected to this universal energy. And that is a fact, because you see everything in this world that we are enjoying, or everything is actually energy, right? Even matter is ultimately coming from energy. Light is energy, heat is energy. So everything in this world is actually made from energy, and that energy is ultimately coming from Brahman. Brahman is the source of all energy which creates this material world. So they meditate on that all-pervasive nature of the absolute, and their goal is to go and merge into that effulgence or light. So their meditation is slightly different. They kind of separate. They kind of meditate on the spiritual nature of everything, because Brahman is all spirit, and what is there in this material world is all matter. So they try to differentiate between what is matter and what is spirit, and then try to focus on the spirit. So their meditation is in that. It's more intellectual, more just kind of focusing on, because it's hard to meditate on a form. It's hard to meditate on just energy. So they try to see themselves as part of this energy, and see everybody as part of this energy. So the impersonal meditation is the hardest. It's the hardest. So I hope that helped, Gunjan.
Yes, Prabhuji. It makes sense. It's clear now.
Okay. So thank you all.